Sally Field just shattered everything you thought you knew about Forrest Gump. For 30 years, she's carried a secret so powerful, it completely changes the way you'll see one of Hollywood's most beloved films. To the world, she was the perfect on-screen mother, warm, wise, and unforgettable. But behind the camera, Field was enduring something that would break most people. What millions saw as the highlight of her career was, in truth, a devastating turning point, one she recognized the moment she stepped onto set. And the real reason behind it exposes a cruel, unspoken truth about Hollywood. The moment a woman is no longer considered young enough, everything changes. When you hear what really happened behind those heartwarming scenes, you'll never look at Mrs. Gump the same way again. Because the truth Sally Field finally revealed isn't just unfair, it's heartbreaking. And the most disturbing part? Everyone in Hollywood acted like it was perfectly normal. But it all started in 1994, the year Forrest Gump became a global phenomenon. Tom Hanks was giving the performance of his life. The effects were groundbreaking. The story of innocence and perseverance touched millions. Yet for one of its stars, the film's success came at an invisible cost. Few people know that Sally Field almost turned down the role entirely. During early discussions, she considered walking away, not because the script was bad, but because she knew accepting it might end her career as she knew it. She could already see the writing on the wall. Still, saying no to a project with that kind of promise was nearly impossible. Robert Zemeckis was fresh off the success of Back to the Future. Tom Hanks was already tipped for an Oscar, and the film was destined to be a cultural milestone. For most actors, it was the kind of opportunity you simply couldn't refuse. Field walked in as Hollywood royalty, a two-time Academy Award winner who had conquered both television and film, from Gidget and The Flying Nun to Norma Ray and Places in the Heart. She'd proven herself time and again. But when the Forrest Gump script landed on her desk, she felt something she couldn't shake: dread. It wasn't just the unusual storyline that made her uneasy. It was something deeply personal, because the role she was being offered would force her to confront the harshest reality of Hollywood. The moment you age, you disappear. Sally Field had been asked to play Tom Hanks's mother, even though he was 10 years younger than her. Let that sink in. A woman barely a decade older was now being cast as the parent of a man who could have been her peer. It wasn't just an odd casting choice. It was a message. Hollywood was telling Field, without saying it outright, that her time as a romantic lead was over. At just 47, she was being quietly pushed into mother territory, while her male counterparts the same age were still playing heartthrobs opposite women half their age. The cruel irony? She needed the work. She wanted to be part of something special. So she smiled, said yes, and poured her heart into the role even as it symbolized the end of an era for her. What happened to Sally Field wasn't unique. It's a reflection of a system that sidelines women the moment they're no longer deemed desirable. And Field has spoken openly about how brutally that shift hit her, not gradually, but like a wall. One day, she was the leading lady. The next, she was everyone's mother. Hollywood's math is simple and merciless. For women, turning 40 means the offers shrink, the roles narrow, and the respect quietly fades. Sally Field lived it firsthand, and for 3 decades, she stayed silent. Now, she's telling the truth, and once you know it, you'll never watch Forrest Gump or Mrs. Gump the same way again. Meanwhile, the men she'd come up with, her peers, her co-stars, were still landing romantic leads, action blockbusters, and starring roles well into their 60s and even 70s. Sally Field, by contrast, found herself trapped in a system that no longer saw her as a leading lady. She watched younger actresses step into the roles she once would have been offered, while she was expected to smile and be grateful for whatever mother role came her way. Hollywood had quietly rewritten her value, and there was nothing she could do about it. What made Forrest Gump especially painful was that this wasn't just any mother role. This was Mrs. Gump, one of the most memorable maternal figures in film history, the heart and soul of a movie that would touch millions. It should have been an honor, a gift, but to Sally Field, it felt like a consolation prize, a polite way of telling her that her best days were behind her. The casting process itself revealed how normalized Hollywood's ageism had become. When executives discussed pairing Field with Tom Hanks, no one questioned it. No one thought it strange that a woman barely 10 years older was being cast as his mother. The decision was made without hesitation because, in an industry where double standards are the norm, absurdities like this hardly even raise an eyebrow. Field later revealed that she wasn't alone. Other actresses in their 40s and 50s were being judged not on their talent or star power, but on how maternal they could look next to younger male leads. The system wasn't designed for women like Sally to shine. It was designed for them to fade quietly into the background, supporting the stories of men rather than leading their own. And so, while playing Mrs. Gump, Field found herself living through a painful contradiction. On screen, she embodied wisdom, warmth, and unconditional love. Off-screen, she was grappling with the death of her own romantic leading lady identity. She was being celebrated for portraying nurturing strength, all while feeling invisible in the very industry that once celebrated her. Every line, every scene, was a reminder that Hollywood no longer saw her as a star, only as someone orbiting someone else's story. And the cruelest part? She had to pretend to be grateful for it. She smiled in interviews, praised the script, and acted as though playing Tom Hanks's mother made perfect sense, because in Hollywood's twisted logic, it did. Women became mothers, men became legends. But this was only the beginning of Sally Field's ordeal. The Forrest Gump production was grueling, not just physically, but emotionally. The long shooting days, the complex effects, the intense expectations of making what everyone hoped would be a defining film of the decade, all of it took a toll. But for Field, there was an added weight no one else on set could fully understand. Director Robert Zemeckis was known for his perfectionism and meticulous attention to detail. His vision for Forrest Gump was ambitious, and his expectations were exacting. Field often found herself in deep discussions and sometimes disagreements with Zemeckis about how Mrs. Gump should be portrayed. Their creative visions didn't always align, leading to tension and frustration on set. Still, out of that tension came magic. Zemeckis pushed her in directions she hadn't anticipated, challenging her instincts and forcing her to dig deeper emotionally. Field has admitted that, while the process was draining, some of her most powerful moments on screen were born from those clashes of vision. Then there was Tom Hanks. Their chemistry was undeniable, tender, authentic, timeless, but their acting methods couldn't have been more different. Hanks worked on instinct, flowing naturally through each scene with effortless charisma. Field, meanwhile, was methodical and analytical, dissecting every emotion and motivation before stepping in front of the camera. That difference created friction. Field sometimes felt she was constantly trying to keep up with Hanks's ease, all while carrying her own private grief about what the role symbolized. She wasn't just portraying a mother letting go of her son. She was, in a way, saying goodbye to the version of herself that Hollywood no longer wanted. And that realization hurt more than any difficult scene ever could. The hardest part of Sally Field's Forrest Gump performance wasn't the accent, the timing, or even the emotional weight of her scenes. It was the internal battle she fought every day between drawing on her own experience as a loving mother and confronting what that role represented in Hollywood's eye. She channeled her real-life bond with her sons to make Mrs. Gump feel genuine, nurturing, strong, and deeply human. But every time the cameras rolled, she was reminded that this was now how the industry saw her, as a mother figure, not as a woman with stories of her own. Field knew Mrs. Gump could easily have been reduced to a background presence, a vessel for life lessons, existing only to guide the male protagonist. So she made a choice to bring depth, warmth, and subtle strength to a character who could have been one-dimensional. Mrs. Gump had to be wise without preaching, loving without clinging, powerful without overshadowing Forrest's journey. When Field delivered the now legendary "Life is like a box of chocolates" line, she had no idea it would become one of the most quoted phrases in movie history. Yet, behind that gentle wisdom was a cruel irony. She was speaking about life's unpredictability while quietly living through one of her own most painful chapters. She was telling audiences to accept what life gives you, even as she struggled to accept what Hollywood had decided to give her. Field later admitted that during filming, she often wondered whether the project would even work. The tone was strange, the story unconventional. There were days she wasn't sure if they were making something magical or something audiences would reject completely. But she could never have imagined the emotional cost of the film's eventual success. When Forrest Gump exploded into a global phenomenon, Sally Field found herself trapped in a paradox. The film she'd once doubted became one of the most beloved in cinema history. Her portrayal of Mrs. Gump was universally praised, her lines quoted everywhere, her performance celebrated as iconic. And yet, inside, she felt a deep ache, a quiet realization that the film's success had also confirmed her worst fear. The praise validated what Hollywood had decided years earlier, that she now belonged in the mother category. Every glowing review of Mrs. Gump felt like another reminder that her romantic leading lady days were officially over. When awards season came, the imbalance was impossible to ignore. Tom Hanks rightfully won the Oscar for Best Actor. His performance was extraordinary, but Field wasn't even nominated. His transformation was hailed as genius, while hers was seen as simply natural, as though maternal wisdom came easily to her, rather than being something she fought to portray with nuance and grace. For 30 years, she kept these feelings mostly to herself. In interviews, she smiled and said all the right things. She spoke lovingly about the film, joined anniversary retrospectives, and upheld its legacy as a cultural treasure. But privately, she was mourning something she couldn't quite put into words: the quiet loss of her place in Hollywood's hierarchy. Her silence wasn't just about protecting Forrest Gump's reputation. She needed time to understand what the experience had really meant. It took years of reflection and the process of writing her memoir for Field to finally confront the truth. Looking back, she realized that Forrest Gump had marked a turning point not only in her career, but in her understanding of Hollywood's treatment of women. It wasn't just about one casting decision. It was a symbol of a system that discards female actors the moment they age out of desirability, no matter their talent or achievements. When Sally Field finally broke her silence, she wasn't trying to rewrite history, she was revealing it. Her revelation wasn't gossip, it was a reckoning. She exposed the cruel math of Hollywood. Men age into legends, while women age into supporting roles. Field has since described the experience as emotionally complicated. She's grateful for Forrest Gump and proud of what the film represents. But she's also clear-eyed about what the casting said about her industry, that even an Oscar-winning actress could be told implicitly that her worth had an expiration date. And once audiences heard her story, Forrest Gump took on new meaning. Mrs. Gump's strength, her tenderness, her quiet wisdom, all of it came from a place of real pain. Sally Field wasn't just playing a mother comforting her son. She was an actress confronting her own invisibility. In that sense, her performance is even more powerful today. It's not just one of cinema's great portrayals of motherhood, it's a quiet act of rebellion. Field turned her frustration and heartbreak into art that touched millions. And now, by speaking up, she's using that same platform to challenge an industry that has failed too many women like her, women who gave Hollywood everything, only to be told they'd become too old to matter. For every Sally Field who gets offered the mother role, there are dozens of actresses who simply vanish from the industry altogether, discarded the moment they're no longer considered commercially viable for romantic leads. The timing of Field's revelation couldn't be more significant. As Hollywood faces growing conversations about representation, equality, and systemic bias, Her story offers a painfully tangible example of how those issues manifest, not as abstract statistics, but as shattered careers and silenced dreams. Field has since connected her Forrest Gump experience to her activism, her environmental protests, her support for LGBTQ rights, her fight for women's equality. She said that learning to speak out about her own mistreatment gave her the courage to speak out about larger injustices. The woman once told to stay quiet became someone willing to be handcuffed for what she believes in. The reaction to her confession was mixed, but overwhelmingly compassionate. Many were shocked to learn she was only 10 years older than Tom Hanks, never realizing how unnatural that casting truly was. Others used her words as a springboard to confront Hollywood's ongoing ageism, both on screen and off. And perhaps that's the most powerful thing about Field's revelation. It changes how we hear Mrs. Gump's most famous line, when she says, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." It's no longer just a line of dialogue. It's the lived wisdom of a woman who accepted what life and Hollywood handed her and still managed to turn pain into art. Field transformed heartbreak into power. She used her struggle as fuel to push for change, to reclaim her narrative, and to remind us that women don't lose their depth with age. They deepen. Her legacy isn't just the characters she's played, but the truth she's dared to tell. By breaking 30 years of silence, Sally Field didn't just change how we see Forrest Gump. She changed how we see the entire entertainment industry. And maybe that, in the end, is the most important performance of her life. Because behind every beloved movie moment lies a real human being, one who fought, doubted, and endured. The next time you hear Mrs. Gump's words, remember, you're not just watching a performance. You're witnessing a woman turning her pain into poetry. And that doesn't diminish the magic. It makes it eternal.